Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Ali. I am a chinchilla owner and breeder and have been keeping chinchillas for nearly 3 decades. In today's video, I thought I'd talk about how much money I made by being a chinchilla breeder last year. Just because I think people are always curious about how much money you can make as a chinchilla breeder, and also I just thought it'd be an interesting video. Now I have around 50 chinchillas. They're not all breeding though. So this is just an open and transparent video about how much money I make. I thought we'd go through this month by month, showing my outgoings and income. That seemed the most logical way of going through this. So in January, I had no chinchillas born at all. And this was somewhat intentional, as I do give my chinchillas a break in between breeding. I also sold no chinchillas in January at all, so my income from chinchillas was in fact a fat zero. However, I did have some outgoings and expenses this month. I also wanted to make you aware that I do buy a lot of my stuff in bulk, for example food, so you won't see that as an outgoing expense every month, if that makes sense. So in January I had some expenses. I had a long needed upgrade of some of my cages. I bought 5 of these cages. Being completely honest with you, I don't keep one pair of chinchillas in a full-size cage like this, because that would be quite dangerous for breeding chinchillas because it's too big. The risk of injury to an expectant mother and the little kits are quite high. So instead, one of these cages is actually converted into 2 separate cages. So even though I've converted these into 2 separate cages, it's still way bigger than my original thicket house cages that I was using. So the total of all these cages came to £699.95, which roughly works out at $884. Other expenses this month was I spent £36 on wood. This was to kit out my new cages for ledges. I spent £44 on 2 large boxes of Timothy hay and £16.99 on a large sack of chinchilla dust. So the total outgoings for January was £796.94, which is just over $1,000, coming in at $1,006. So yeah, quite a lot of outgoings for January. So in February, I had 2 kits born, a male standard grey and a male tan white. Obviously, if I did decide to sell these, I wouldn't be selling them till May time, which is when they're 12 weeks old. But in February, I did decide to sell some of my chinchillas that I had born in 2022 that I was initially holding on to see how they turned out. I sold 5 chinchillas, totaling £710 for all 5. I did, however, have some outgoings for February. I had £30 for bedding, vet bills for an x-ray that I had to have on one of my chinchillas, which cost me £156.98, 10 sacks of food, which cost me £138.75, and toys totaling £58.95. So in February, I made a grand total after all the expenses of £325.32. So in March, I did have 10 babies born. However, unfortunately, 4 of these babies were either stillborn, extremely premature, or died shortly after birth, which is actually incredibly common when you're breeding chinchillas to have baby losses. I like to record every baby that's born, even if they're born dead or die shortly afterwards, because this gives me an understanding overall of how many losses I have had and whether my chinchillas are in a healthy state or not. Now, I didn't sell any chinchillas in March, nor did I have any outgoings such as food or dust or hay. So I had no income in March, but I didn't have any outgoings either, so I made 0 in March. April, expenses wise, I had to buy some bedding costing £30. In April, I also had 1 chinchilla born, but I didn't sell any chinchillas in April, so I made nothing from chinchillas, but I had to purchase bedding for them, so £30 in bedding. In May I had 1 chinchilla born. I also sold 3 chinchillas this month, totalling £500. But I did have some expenses as well. I had £44 in hay, £124.50 in food, £16.99 in dust and £91.30 in vet bills. Total net amount for this month after expenses was £276.79. In June, I had 9 babies born. Sadly, 1 did pass away, but I had 8 healthy babies. I sold 3 chinchillas that were born in March, totaling £505. I also had a few expenses, £30 for bedding, £60 in toys, and £30 in wood to replace some ledges in the cages. So June was quite a good month for me. I made a net amount of £385. In July, I had 2 babies born. I sold 1 chinchilla for £150 and I had some expenses this month. I had £44 in hay, £20 for toys, giving me a grand total net amount for July of £86. In August, I had 3 babies born and I sold 2 chinchillas for a total of £400. Expenses for August were dust for £16.99, food £94.50, bedding £30. Total for August was £258.51. In September, I had 1 baby born. I sold 6 chinchillas, totaling £525. I didn't have any outgoings in September, so that was a whole £525 that I made. Now, in October, I had 3 kits born, which turns out to be the last 3 kits born for the year. I also sold 1 chinchilla in October, totaling £80. In October, I also bought some hay for £44 and some toys for £68 and £30 in bedding, giving me a total of minus £62 for this month. So, in November, I sold 2 chinchillas for a total of £160. I had food outgoings of £130.77, making a grand total for November of £29.98. So in December, I didn't sell any chinchillas at all because I don't sell chinchillas in December, and I did have to buy some bedding though for £30, so in December I made minus £30. Overall for the entire year, if you include all the chinchilla sales and the expenses, I made a grand net profit of £983, rounded up, which roughly is around $1,242. So last year was actually a really good year for me because normally I don't make a profit, or if I do, it's really kind of break even, and most years I do make a slight loss. Last year the vet bills were extremely low. Some years my vet bills can run into the thousands. So yeah, actually really happy with the fact that I have actually made nearly £1,000 in profit. It does require so much work to look after 50 chinchillas and to keep them healthy and happy. So just be aware that if you are going to go into breeding chinchillas, you're probably not going to make enough money to retire off of. You're not going to make huge amounts of money unless you kind of do things a little bit unethical, or if you have an extremely large herd, there is the possibility of making some money. If you're doing it on small scale, the chances of me making a lot of money are pretty remote. So if you don't actually enjoy chinchillas as animals, I would not recommend going into breeding chinchillas. Now, if you love chinchillas and really enjoy looking after them, then yes, go for it. But if it's something that you're primarily looking into to make money from, then I would say it's not for you, because yeah, you don't make any money. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it informative, and I shall see you in another video soon. Goodbye for now.
Brighter days are on their way. Forever's how long they'll stay. Brighter days are on their way.